Africa, and when it comes to how we do business and how we try to, when we're buying from one another, we really, really try to negotiate. Like, can you give me the best price? We are not prepared to pay the most to our brothers and sisters or those we are in community with. But if something has been produced outside of Africa, if it is coming from Paris, if it is like a Louis Vuitton, we are not even arguing with that. We are paying our shillings, our dollars, our currency to buy that. And we are in many ways continuing to help other countries, white countries, to develop while we ourselves don't find value in what we are selling or devalue what we have. And that is a colonial mindset.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
Hey there, welcome back to the final episode of Represented Podcast for 2024. Can you believe it's been a year? Like, we have journeyed for the past 12 months together. This episode is one that is going to be in reflection, just start taking us back to what 2024 was, just reviewing the things that we've gone through in this podcast and what to expect in 2025. Now, I've just come back from a wonderful Christmas holiday with family, and we traveled 6 hours north of Bathurst to a town called Armadale in the region of New England in New South Wales. And it was so good to be with extended family. There's just something about Christmas time. It's, for me personally, it is my favorite time of the year. I think because of what Christmas meant to me growing up as a little kid, and just the joy, the abundance, the being together, and the happiness that Christmas was for me. Now, I know that is not the case for many, many people. And this can be a time of, potentially missing loved ones, or just feeling the hollowness of Christmas. And so for us, being away from family, our, extended family back in Kenya, having somebody here who is not so far away that we can get together with. This is my on my husband's side, his auntie and her husband and her children, just being able to get together with them and celebrate Christmas and still it have that Kenyan feeling to it that just makes us feel even more connected to our roots. And so there was this big desire to just make that trip. We made that trip last year and we've made it again this year. Just got back yesterday. And so at the time of recording, this will be dropping. This is fresh. Like, this is not pre-recorded. This is fresh, hot off the press, if you like. And just as I was saying, a deep desire to be with family. There was just this longing. Even my little son was saying, Mom, I can't wait for us to make that trip to Armadale. I'm so looking forward to it. And nothing beats the connection. Nothing beats being together, speaking in your mother tongue, and just the stories just kind of hit deeper, they're more special, they're more, I don't know how to put it, they're just more juicier. The way we pronounce the words, just the way the words are spoken and their meaning. It's hard to translate back into English. So if I was to say a certain word in Kikuyu, which is my mother tongue, and translate it back in English, it just wouldn't hit the same. And so if you're listening to this and you're bilingual or multilingual as I am, you will just know it's really, really hard to explain. Some things they just have a deeper, deeper meaning. And or just sweeter when it is spoken that way. One of their family friends had come to visit as well. She had come with her boyfriend and her brother, and she was speaking to their dad. And they are of a different tribe. They're from the Luo tribe, and I don't know Luo very well. Kenya is made up of over 40 tribes, and we don't always understand each other. They're completely different unless you come from like a particular region that's close to each other. Then you might understand a few words here and there, but the dialect is different. The way words are pronounced is different. So she was speaking to her dad, and I know a few words here and there of Luo, but for some reason this time around, I felt like I could almost understand everything they were talking about. They were talking about the food, the presents. She has an investment property there, and talking about, looking forward to going to see it after Christmas and all of those things. The conversation was so wonderful to listen to. It was full of joy. It was very loving, a dad, a traditional dad who has his roots. And by the way, he was all the way in Kenya, in Siaya County, talking to his daughter, obviously here in Australia. And there was a strong bond, there was love in it, and you could just tell there was something special. And I remember listening to that conversation and just feeling so much um, pride in who we are and where we come from. Whereas if I was listening to this conversation at home in Kenya, I don't think I would have that appreciation. I think because we are just one and the same, and when we are close to each other, those are the things that you take for granted. But being far removed, not always being with family, that just felt so much more special. And you know what even made it more memorable was when everybody made a call to their family members all over the world, was how the videos were shared. I remember calling my brother in Atlanta. It was around 11 a.m. here on Christmas Day, and it was 7 p.m. in Atlanta. And, they were having Christmas Eve dinner, getting ready for that. And we were getting ready for Christmas lunch, and just sharing the video of all the commotion that was happening. One of the girls was preparing a ham, and my brother's like, "What do you mean ham? Why would you eat ham for Christmas?" And it's like, it's the Aussie tradition here. And he's like, "We're having turkey." Well, we're like, "We do have turkey here, but ham is kind of the hero dish." And so it was interesting to just hear all the different things and share in the videos, and everybody saying, "Hi, how are you doing?" And just the joy, the excitement. There's something about Christmas that just brings people together. People travel from far to come to be with one another, and it is just a special time. And for that, I am grateful for. And it is something that I think I will always hold dear to my heart. And I am coming out of that trip now, being back home with so much peace and contentment. As a child, it was the presents, what did I get for Christmas? Now it's a lot deeper. It's more of the conversations, it's relationships and how we are valuing them and spending intentional time with one another. That's been my biggest takeaway from this whole Christmas season. Still in it, looking forward to the new year, but certainly just such a beautiful way to close off the year. And so, as we take a deep dive and review into the podcast, this podcast started a year ago. So, 1st of January 2024 was when the first episode dropped. And since then, we've produced 50 episodes, including the premiere episode, which we have as a trailer, but really it's a full episode, to be quite honest, over 20 minutes. And so, whilst this one might say episode 49, it really is 50 because of that first premiere episode. And it has brought me a lot of grounding doing this podcast. It was a long time coming. It was something I felt that I really wanted to do. And it is also something that I believe has given me a sense of purpose. Uh, an added layer of responsibility and doing something that is fulfilling. It's not a money aspect kind of thing, but it's the thing that you do that when you finish hitting record, you're like, I am grateful. I am so glad I got to do this. I'm so glad that this information is getting out there, and whoever receives this information, I hope that it will truly be something that illuminates their path when it comes to matters to do with racial equity. I've really, really enjoyed, amplifying the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. It has been intentional and deliberate to get as many of them to come on the show and share their expertise, share their lived experience, share their skills with us so that we can better understand and so that we're hearing different voices from different corners of the earth. And we just have a deeper level of appreciation, and our level of understanding is opened up much more to what we are just used to. I've made new friends, something I've not always leaned into as an introvert, but honestly, I've loved the connections made, and I know you've loved them too because some of you have been kind enough to either DM me on Instagram or send me an email and say, "Oh, Annie, this episode just hit home," or "I can't wait to listen to this episode. This is a topic I've been really wanting to learn more about, and I'm just grateful." And even for those who are women of color saying, "We don't have another woman of color or Black hosted podcast that speaks to these matters of race here in Australia, and you're doing it, and I'm sending everyone I know to listen to your podcast. I look forward to it every Monday." Those hearing that just it just makes it so meaningful to be doing something that is connected to the betterment collectively of us as human beings. Um, One thing that I knew would happen when I started the podcast, but has certainly just really expanded, was my level of understanding when it comes to matters to do with race. I never came into this in interviews in particular with guests and particularly with fellow DEI leaders, practitioners, knowing everything. I approached this as a student, and I do believe that's what has made the conversations so engaging. They've been rich. I've put myself in just really applying that beginner's mindset and tried to ask questions as though I was in the beginning of my journey. And when I heard the responses and the responses that have been given have allowed me to look at things not only differently, but for that information to sink in a little bit deeper. And so I've been in class for the past 50 or so weeks. You could say I've been in class asking questions and just gaining information. And I'm sure for you as well, you've gained information. And so the conversations that have stayed with me, I've reflected often, and I just took some time and as I was thinking of what do I share for this final episode, what would be just something good to end on. And what came up for me was a few different episodes that have really stayed with me. Like, I don't think a month has gone by or a couple of weeks that I haven't reflected on what was shared on there. The very first one that comes to mind on a regular basis is my conversation back in March with Elma Akob. I actually found Elma through a TEDx talk that she had delivered titled The Dangers of Western Feminism to African Women. Elma captured me from the moment she opened her mouth and started speaking. She had me. She had my attention. She is, in my opinion, a natural born orator. How she speaks, how she presents herself, how she puts forward the argument is so compelling. And so reaching out to her and her saying yes and coming on to the podcast and sharing very much along those lines of the dangers of Western feminism. And this time I was very deliberate to Black African women because it's different to white African women. It is so different. And so I wanted to make that distinction and have that conversation directed to the Black African women. And there were just so many things that I didn't know, looking at feminism from a Western perspective. And obviously, having lived here in Australia for over 20 years myself, my views are very Westernized. How I look at things is not how I would potentially be looking at them had I lived in Kenya all my life and never left. And so there was just so much valuable insights that she shared. And the number of people who have downloaded that episode tells me that it is hitting home at a deeper level, and it is something that you all want and are interested in hearing and learning. And even my students inside my program, my signature program, Represented, have been taken away by Elma. They're like, I had never looked at it from that perspective. And mind you, majority of the students who take Represented are white women in business, online business owners. And these are concepts, these are lenses that they're looking through that they never have. And so this information is incredibly illuminating for them. If you haven't listened to Elma's episode, I suggest you do a rewind and go all the way back to March and listen to that episode. It is an absolute gem and it is relevant today, right now, as it was back in March. And I think it will be for years and years to come. The other episode that stayed with me was how Katie Kurtz described how trauma-informed care is rooted in social justice frameworks. I had heard her say this before in different ways, the necessity of being anti-racist, the necessity of understanding anti-racism and oppression, that it is linked to being trauma-informed. You cannot be trauma-informed unless you are anti-racist, unless you are anti-oppression. And just the history lesson that she gave me during that conversation of that podcast, of how trauma-informed care is rooted in social justice frameworks was something that will stay with me. You know, the founders, the people who came together and said, well, if you want to learn to be trauma-informed, this is the history. This is taking us back to the civil rights movement and before, and the groups that emerged during that time and were really the catalyst to what the framework now is, that is now trauma-informed care. It was pivotal. If you haven't listened to that episode and you are somebody who holds space for others, you will want to listen to that episode because space holding, particularly for us as coaches, is a skill that we are continually developing. And we really need to understand what it means to be trauma informed and to hold space with care, especially for those who identify differently from us and have different needs from us. How can we hold a space that is not only inclusive, but a space that allows them to feel a sense of safety so that they're able to open up in a way, or at least meet the goals that they have set for themselves, and you as a space holder, helping them get to that place. It is impossible to do if you do not know or you are not trauma informed. That episode is a must. The other one, number 3, stayed with me, and oh my gosh, I could have talked to Dr. Kathomi Gatwiri for hours and taken notes. The episode is called Power, Colonial Ideology, and Racial Trauma. I believe it's episode number 40. She is just a wealth of wisdom. How she broke it down and explained about the idea of colonialism, the ideology of it, and the effects of racial trauma, how it has impacted Black people specifically, and the concept of power. Why power and white supremacy culture? She just breaks it down in such an easy to understand way. And she uses the analogy of the ocean and trying to get to the beach and trying to decolonize, and how we are all in it. We are all in this, swimming in this pool of colonial ideology. And she's an absolutely phenomenal teacher in this space. And that is an episode to absolutely go back to. What stayed with me and what I continue to come back to is the racial trauma that Black people have then gone on to have as a result of colonialism. And so much so in the African continent, even just by the way we trade, how we interact, how I listened to this podcast, and I'm sorry if I sound like I'm going around in so many different directions, but there was this, I have to tell you this podcast that I listened to, and maybe it wasn't a podcast, actually, maybe it was a social media post that I saw by Vusi Tembekwayo. If you do not know Vusi Tembekwayo, you need to look him up. You need to follow him. He's an incredible speaker and an investor, a businessman, and he was talking about Africa. And when it comes to how we do business and how we try to, when we're buying from one another, we really, really try to negotiate. Like, can you give me the best price? We are not prepared to pay the most to our brothers and sisters or those we are in community with. But if something has been produced outside of Africa, if it is coming from Paris, if it is like a Louis Vuitton, we are not even arguing with that. We are paying our shillings, our dollars, our currency to buy that. And we are in many ways continuing to help other countries, white countries, to develop, while we ourselves don't find value in what we are selling or devalue what we have. And that is a colonial mindset. I loved how he shared that. And so the impact is real. The racial trauma exists. It is there, whether we know it or not. It affects how we are living, how we are showing up, how we are interacting with one another. That conversation is a must listen to. And then finally, and by no means is this list exhaustive, but I just had to pick. I wanted to pick 3, but I had to squeeze this one in because I was like, this conversation, and maybe because of it's one that I did recently. It's just really stayed with me. Elizabeth Lang, How Bias is Shaping Our World. I often talk about how I get a lot of, encouraging words about the work that I do from peers and others in the industry saying, "You're doing great work, Annie." But there's always this feeling that this work is not for those people who are saying, this is good work, keep going. It's like they're like, I'm one of the good ones, Annie. The ones who need this work are those who are racist. And I've always disputed that and been like, no, 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 no. It is you who thinks that you don't need this work, who is drawn to the idea of racial equity and justice. You believe in that. It is you who needs to do this work more than you think. And so, uh, how Elizabeth describes racism being so unconscious through the experiment between the two little girls. They're about 5 or 6 years old. An experiment was done. One is white, one is black. You have to go back and listen to that conversation because I don't want to just give you a little bit of it. You really have to listen to it. It's in its entirety. You really appreciate it, and just talks about how we are unconsciously biased, unconsciously prejudiced, unconsciously racist, and not even realize it because of how we're conditioned to see certain things. And most importantly, how we are conditioned not to see certain things. That conversation, that example will stay with me for a very, very long time to come. There have been so many other conversations. The guests who have come on there have been so giving of their time, giving of their knowledge. There's been deep, powerful, vulnerable conversations, too many to mention one by one. But this season, when you have a little bit of downtime, I highly recommend going back and listening to some of the ones that you've already listened to, or perhaps some that you never got to. You're like, oh, I'll pass on that one. You never know. Some of the ones that you pick to pass on are the ones that if you go back and listen to, you're like, I didn't know that this information was going to land with me in this way. And I'm glad I took the time to listen. So use this downtime that you have to go back and listen to some of those episodes. I feel so, so grateful, honestly, as I reflect on what 2024 has been like. And there are three things in particular that I am grateful for. Number one is for each guest that said yes. And the reason why I'm so grateful is because a good majority of them I did not know personally. So it was like this stranger on the internet reaching out to them and them saying yes. And I am so tremendously grateful for a stranger on the internet approaching you and you saying yes. And one of the things that made them say yes was the topics, the caliber of this podcast, and them saying, "You're doing work that I definitely want to be aligned with and associated with." It's a yes from me. And so I am incredibly grateful for those guests. Uh, I'm so grateful for the topics that we have covered. Some have been heavy, heavy to navigate, putting questions together or doing some research and trying to share this information with you has been heavy, but it's also been necessary. We cannot run away from the hard conversations. We can't say, oh, this is too hard or it's making me feel too uncomfortable. And I don't want to, I'm just going to bury my head in the sand and I'm just not going to go there. We need to go there. We need to have these conversations because not only do they make us knowledgeable, but I truly, truly believe they make us better human beings. And so I am grateful that we've been able to cover heavy topics, but still bring an element of hope for sure. an element of love and compassion through this work, a lens that I know hasn't always been brought through anti-racism work, but I certainly feel it, particularly with my students who choose to come and study with me. There's that sense of non-judgment that I can bring myself broken, unknowing, messy, with all the mistakes that I've made, and still there be room for me in a program like the one you've created, Annie, an opportunity for me to grow in ways I never thought possible. And so I am grateful for the topics we have covered. I am grateful for you. Yes, you, the listener, for taking the time to listen and to tune in again and again. This podcast exists because of people like you, people who are tuning in, people who are going like, wow, I got to listen to this episode that has dropped this Monday, or you put it on your to listen list for the weekend. I am so grateful because obviously the fuel to do this wouldn't be as strong if the interest wasn't there. And so I am grateful for you immensely. So now, what can we expect in 2025? Three things. I think I love my threes. Three things again. Number one, more deep conversations. So we can grow in our level of understanding. So expect more deep conversations. I love deep conversations. And obviously, being an introvert, I don't particularly like small talk. I'm a deep thinker. At least I choose to see myself that way. And I love to go as deep as the conversation or the comfortability will allow. I love to go deep. And so looking forward to deeper conversations in 2025 to allow us collectively to grow. Looking at bringing you more amazing new guests. Some you may already know, and others you'll be glad to get to know and follow. So, what I love about New Year's, every new year for me is a canvas. It's just a blank canvas. And I have my plans, I have the things that I would like to accomplish, but I also submit them because my faith is really important to me. I submit my plans to God and I say, this is what I'm planning. God, would you bless this? Or would you show me the path that you would have me take? And so I am looking forward to seeing how it all unfolds. And when we're doing another review in 2025, what that will look like. Number three, I'm looking forward to the new resources, particularly if you're an online business owner looking at ways to build a racially equitable business. This time I am using to create some new resources to help you on that journey. And I can't wait to share that with you. Now, I will be taking a short break back towards the end of January. And I know in my spirit, I just know, and I choose to believe that 2025 will be a wonderful year. Until then, I want to leave you with this scripture that has been an anchor for me, and it is from Numbers 6:24-26, and it says, "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace." Wishing you, your loved ones, a very incredible 2025.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. P. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented.